Janwahr's Bridge. Reading for 2nd edition, Bob Jones University Press. Story by Don L. Watkins. Illustrated by Dell Thompson and John Burke. Silver Horn. Janwahr, the youngest son of King Rolde, was blind. He sat in his tower room and pulled at the leather strap of his boot, as if the boot could be on any more securely than it already was. He always did everything twice, just to be sure. In the courtyard below, his brothers, Tayton and Nadar, called for their horses to be saddled. Servants ran across the cobblestones to the stables. I wonder if Gemla is going riding this morning, he thought. Gemla, his sister, whom everyone called beautiful, would let him ride behind her sometimes, but only when Tayton and Nadar were not there to scold about his getting hurt. He tugged the strap of his other boot a second time. "Bandine," he called. "I am here, Prince Janwahr," a servant about the prince's age answered. It was true that the palace servants addressed him as Prince Janwahr. The stablemen and yeomen always said, "Your Highness," when they spoke to him. But in all his 9 years, he had never felt like a prince. "Janwahr would do," he told his servant. "I know you do not want me to use your title, sir, but I should not call my master by his name only. It is disrespectful." Janwahr nodded. "Shall we go?" The prince put out his arm for Bandine. The servant took it. "To the river, as always, your Highness." "Yes, to the river." As Bandine stepped forward, Janwahr felt confirmed in his belief. A blind boy could never truly be a prince. Janwahr and Bandine walked out onto a gray marble portico. The prince felt the smooth sun on his cheeks and neck. "Is the sky clear?" he asked. "As blue as—" the servant began. There was silence. "The sky is cloudless, Prince Janwahr." "It is all right to say blue, Bandine. I think of blue as the way the air feels on a calm summer evening." "How is red to you, sir?" the servant asked. "Like my brother Nadar, when our sister outshoots him on the archery fields." Bandine and the prince laughed together, and then went down the jade steps. At the river, Janwahr sat under his favorite Wadilia tree. He had sat there so often that he had worn a comfortable hollow between two big roots. The roots now stuck up so far that they made armrests for the prince. The upper branches of the huge old Wadilia reached far out over the river and kept it as cool as early morning around the roots all day. "Come back for me at noon," said Janwahr, and the servant left him, as always, without a word. Where Janwahr sat was at the narrowest point in the river. Bandine had told him once that it was 2 palace lengths to the other bank. Janwahr could not imagine how high and rough the ridges were behind him, but Bandine had said they were treacherous. He leaned back against the tree, smelling the river flowers and the damp earth. The hulias sang above him, and the water sloshed against the bank just below him. When he was sure Bandina had gone, Janwahr whistled, a high, swift whistle, and listened. Some way off, he heard a rush and swirl of water. He smiled widely. Then there was a sound like milk being poured into a tall glass, and Janwahr knew that his companion was coming. "Good morning, Danzi," he called out. A rolling roar answered him. "You're such a noisy fellow in the morning. We could never have you about the palace." Janwahr heard splashing right at his feet, and he knew Danzi had reached the bank and was tossing the water off his great head. The prince reached forward, and Danzi laid his head on the bank. Janwahr patted the broad expanse familiarly. He ran his hand over the rough scales, each of which was bigger than his hand. "I never get used to how big your nose is. Just the tip of it is bigger than I am." Danzi gurgled deep in his throat in response. Janwahr came forward on his hands and knees, climbing right up Danzi's massive nose until he came to the giant curved horn. The horn was always cold and smooth like the silver cups in the palace. Janwahr was sure the great horn was solid silver. He looped one arm halfway around the horn, pulling himself onto it, straddling the base as he would a horse. He adjusted his position on the inside of the sweeping curve. "Let's go, Danzi." The huge beast lifted his head. Up and up went Janwahr through the air, through the leaves of the wood dahlia, into the strong sunlight. Then Danzi swayed his head from side to side, gently swinging the prince about like a blade of grass. Janwahr thought, "Someday I will bring Nadar and Tayton here to see me ride. Then they will let me on the horses." The prince laughed aloud with delight. "Now, roundabout!" Danzi swung his head in a wild circle, first clockwise, then counterclockwise, then clockwise again, and again, and again. "Well done, Danzi," said the prince, patting the vast cheek as soundly as he could. "Good boy." Danzi glided to the shore and lowered his head as softly as the snow comes down. He blew gusts of wind from his nostrils as he waited for the boy to get off. "All tired out, are you? Then you rest, and I will sing a song I made up for you." In clear tenor, Janwahr picked up a merry tune. "The banks are steep, the water's deep, but I shall never have fear, oh, for I can fly like the Jewelah's shy, when Danzi boy is near, oh." Danzi gurgled and blew out one big gust. "Well, let's see you do better then," said the prince, and gave the beast a tap on his nose. Danzi dozed a while, and Janwahr tried to make up another verse for his song. He could not come up with a rhyme for silver, so by and by he gave up the effort. "Wake up, Danzi, you old snoozer. Do you want your back scratched?" Danzi stirred himself lazily. "Hurry along. It takes some time, you know," Janwahr said. Danzi snorted and nudged the prince. The boy pulled a sturdy, forked branch from beside the tree and held it firmly out over the bank. Danzi ducked his head under the branch and began to swim forward close to the branch. Janwahr pointed the branch downward until he felt it touch the back of the beast. Danzi swam on, arching his great length to come under the prongs of the branch. For 10 minutes he passed by, until at last he slapped the tip of his tail in the water to let Janwahr know he could stop holding the branch. "You get longer every day, Danzi." Invasion. The beast had made a mighty circle. His head was nearly to the bank again. He roared his gratitude. "Someday I'll bring my sister here to see you. You'll like her. She is beautiful, they say, and she will know how to appreciate so fine a creature as you. The gift I bring you today," said the prince, "is the North Star. My father's sailors say they use it to steer their ships. You may have it." Danzi slapped the water with the end of his tail and roared. "You like that gift, do you?" said Janwahr. "Do you like it better than the summer breeze I gave you yesterday?" Janwahr could feel Danzi's head very near. "You had better go now, before Bandine comes. I'll see you tomorrow, my friend." Danzi put his nose against Janwahr and then swam slowly backwards, submerging himself as he went. He left so quietly that the prince was often not sure he was gone. On this day, Danzi had hardly disappeared before the prince heard Bandine calling, "Prince Janwahr!" Janwahr stood up and turned toward the sound. "Your Highness!" Bandine called. "What is it? Why are you early?" Bandine came thrashing through the tanglebriars, forsaking the safer but longer path. He arrived before the prince, breathless and scratched. "What is it, Bandine?" Janwahr reached out to take his servant by the shoulders. "An invasion," he said between pants. "The kingdom to the south." "Are we under siege right now?" Janwahr felt his heart leaping. "No," the servant puffed. "What then?" "A messenger delivered a declaration of war this morning. The southern king begins his march tomorrow." "Why?" "For your sister, your Highness." "Gemla, come, take me home, quickly." At the palace, an argument was going on in the court. "Give me 500 horsemen, father," Nadar said. "I can meet the invaders in the third valley." "No, no," said Taton, the eldest. "We must send a delegation to discuss the matter." "Stop it, all of you," said Gemla in her quiet voice. "I will marry the southern king to spare our father all this trouble." She turned away to the window. 500 men, and I will hold them in the valley," Nadar began again. "You only know how to settle things by taking sword in hand," Taton glared at Nadar. "And you would send old philosophers and the aged of our court into the very teeth of war." "Silence!" King Rolday stood up, and the hall went silent. Janwahr still stood at the west door with Bandine. "Hear what I say," said the king. "Your solutions are not real solutions at all. First, I ask you, Gemla, do you love this king?" "I love the rats and the grain more," said she without raising her voice. "As I thought. The king of Wedona is more to your liking, is he not?" She blushed in answer. "So no more foolish talk from you then. You will not marry so wicked a man as the southern king for any reason. Now, Nadar, do you know the size of the invading army?" No, sir, he replied. Then how can you say 500 of my horsemen will hold them? In years past I have known this king to go to war with 2,000 soldiers. He may have as many now. Nadar studied the toe of his boot. And you, Tayton, what is there to negotiate? War has been declared already. It is too late for talking. No one there, not the princes, nor the counselors, nor the captains, made any answer to the king. Janwahr listened, every nerve tight. He would die to save Gimla, but what could he do? He could not ride. He could not hold a bow. He strained forward, hoping to hear comfort from his father. But before the king could speak, one of his outriders appeared at the north door, winded and pale. He bowed low and waited. "Speak, man," said the king. "Your Majesty," he said, "the southern army is in the second valley." Astonishment gripped the hearers. "Say on," said the king. "If they march on at the rate they are coming, they will be here at dusk." "How many men?" said the king. "About 1,000, sir." The king's mouth was set and grim. He scanned the room as if searching for an answer. Janwahr felt his heart throbbing against his ribs. He wanted someone to think of a way to save Gimla, but no one spoke. "Call up 1,000 horsemen," said the king. Nadar paced toward the door. "Wait!" cried Janwahr. All eyes turned to him. The king was amazed. "Janwahr, what is it?" he asked. "I have a plan, sir." The king saw the desire in the boy. "Quickly, son." "Let Nadar take the horsemen to the ridges above the river at the narrow place and stay out of sight. I will get Gimla to the other side. When the southern army comes to the river, let Nadar and the men sweep down and trap them against the river. The ridges will be too steep and the pass too narrow for them to escape. Then let Tayton and the counselors talk." Everyone waited for the king to dismiss the plan. "How will you get Gimla across quickly enough? Our best rowers cannot steer across that current in a whole day." "I know a bridge, my father." "What bridge? There are no bridges." "A bridge that comes out of the water." "And what is to stop the southern king from sending his men across that bridge?" "It is a secret bridge, sir." King Rolde weighed the risks. He wanted to believe his son for many reasons. Then, to the surprise of all, he said, "We will do as Janwahr suggested. Obey him." Janwahr could hardly breathe in the silence that followed. "Please bring up the horsemen, Nadar," he said. Nadar glanced at the king, who nodded once. Nadar left immediately. "Sir," said the youngest prince, "Bandine and I will take Gimla to safety. Tayton and what counselors you choose should come behind the horsemen. Yes?" "As you say, son," the king replied. "But I will come with you. I want to see this miraculous bridge that even I did not know existed in my kingdom." Before long, the king, Princess Gimla, and the king's guards, Bandine, and Janwahr stood at the bank by the Widalia tree. "Where's the bridge?" Gemla asked, a quiver in her voice. Janwahr gave a high whistle, and then another. Near the other shore, a huge blue sea dragon's head broke the surface, roaring. The king and the princess gasped in wonder. Bandine and the guards fell back. The dragon lifted its head high out of the water and shook the shining water off in all directions. Its horn glistened in the sun. "That horn must be solid silver," said Gemla under her breath, holding Janwar's arm. "Is it silver?" Janwahr said. "I thought it was." Danzi swam forward. "It's coming here," said Bandine, running behind the Widalia. Janwahr smiled. "Danzi won't hurt you." When the shining monster neared the shore, even the king stepped back. Two of his guards advanced and crossed their swords in front of him. The great beast put his head beside the roots of the tree and waited. Trapped. "Danzi, this is my father, the king, and my sister, Princess Gemla. We need your help." Janwahr heard Danzi gurgle. "Can you stretch from one bank to the other?" Danzi swirled himself around. He arched himself in several dozen places and made the water toss out beside him for yards and yards. Then, from across the river, a slap of his tail sounded. "He's ready," said Janwahr. Gemla, still holding her brother's arm, hesitated. "It's all right," the prince said. "Danzi will help us. I would go with you, but I must wait here for the invaders." At last, Gemla stepped forward, and at the king's command, 4 guards took her across the dragon bridge to the other side. "Is he beautiful?" Janwahr asked his father as Gemla was crossing. "Worthy of a prince," said the king. Janwahr said nothing. "Thank you, Danzi," said the king, and Danzi dropped beneath the surface, flashed the tip of his tail once, and was gone. After some hours, Janwahr could hear hoofbeats and trumpets and shouts. "Can you see them yet?" "Not yet," said King Rolde. "If my plan fails," the prince began. "Never doubt your plan once it's underway. Choose the best plan and stay with it. A king must believe in himself if he would have his men's trust." Janwahr remained silent. It was good to stand here by the river with his father. He straightened and clasped his hands loosely behind his back. At length, the king said, "They are here." The whole pass between the ridges was suddenly filled with riders on huge battle horses. The armor and swords shone out in the setting sun. On and on they came, leather creaking and metal clinking. The horses tossed their heads, rattling their martingales and chest plates. They drew up before King Rolde and Prince Janwahr. The southern king leaned forward in his saddle, throwing back his black hood. "Where's your feeble army, Rolde?" All along the ridges above and in the pass, Rolde's soldiers appeared silently, gray and solemn against the dusk. King Rolde pointed. The southern king looked back and started. His men tensed in their saddles and put their hands to their scabbards. The southern king swung back around. "A stupid trap! You do not have me. I have you." And with that he sprang from his horse and drew a dagger against Rolday's throat. He leaned toward Rolday's ear. "Call them down, or I kill you." Janwahr whistled high and long and loud. Just behind them, the river burst open with a great rush and a horrible roar. The silver horn gleamed as the water streamed off the giant creature. Danzi saw the armies and raised himself 100 feet out of the water, shaking his head and screaming. The Southern king staggered back. "Help us, Danzi!" Janwahr called. The great head swooped down. Danzi caught up the evil king by his tunic and held him there. "Your men surrender, or I give you to my friend here for his supper." The two armies stood frozen in horror and awe, but the Southern king refused to speak. "Roundabout!" called out Janwahr. Danzi took the Southern king in 4 giant circles, skimming the water with him on the downward moves, raking him through the Wadilia on the upward. "Enough!" the king called. "We surrender!" "Well done, Danzi! Drop him!" called the prince. In mid-arch, Danzi opened his jaws, and the king flew out down into the river. As he clambered about in the water, Tayton and the counselors came forward through the invading armies. The Southern king dragged himself onto the bank. "Shall we discuss the terms of surrender?" said Rolday to the dripping king. Bandine, overcome with the wonder of it all, ran forward to his master. "Well done, Janwahr!" "Prince Janwahr," said King Rolday. Janwahr smiled broadly and straightened his tunic. "Once